Welcome to the first in a series of introductory videos for InventorCAM. In this video, we'll be covering global settings. So the global settings are essentially just all the default settings of the software. Anything to do with the software before you get into toolpaths, before you choose your part geometries, your toolpath geometries. You can get it to just auto-select stuff for you and a couple other things. So let's just take a look. So click on CAM settings. And it brings up this window here, and it starts with the user directories. User directories are simply the file locations for some of these items that you'll be dealing with. The first one is user directory for CAM parts. That is simply where your part will be saved. Now, looking ahead to some of the future introductory videos, when you open up a brand new part, it asks you where you'd like to save your file. You could either save it in the CampArt directory, at this particular location here that you set up in your defaults, or you'll have an ability to save it at a different location. But if you choose the default option, you can set up the default option here. You can see that it's actually pointing at my 2019 folder, but you can click browse and browse to any folder you like on a network or locally on your hard drive. User directory for system additional files. This is just a file location for everything else related to the software. Things like your tool libraries, any kind of holder definitions. You can see here that I have it pointed to the inch location. Again, you can browse to any location, again, on a hard drive or on a network. Excel file for thread tables. Again, if you're doing any kind of threading in InventorCAM, this is where the thread table is kept. You can see, again, mine's pointing to the inch folder, but you can browse to wherever that XLS file is kept with that information. And iMachining database is where all your iMachining machine definitions and iMachining material definitions will be kept. Again, those topics will be covered in other intro videos in this series, but for now, this is just where those items are kept. And again, you can browse to wherever you'd like to keep those. Under units, you choose the units of measure you'd like to use for your part. Again, these are just defaults. So when you first open up an InventorCAM part, it gives you the option of which units you'd like to work in going forward. But the default option you select here. Default CNC controller shows you the address where the post-processor files are kept. In this case, it is the GPP tool folder. I have it pointing to my 2018, but again, you can browse to wherever you like. So I happen to keep all mine in 2018 from a previous version, and rather than point to the new version, I went back and pointed to the 2018. But you can browse to wherever you like, especially on a network where all your posts are shared amongst different offices or different departments. This is a great option here where you can browse to the default location of your post files. And you can actually auto-select the post files ahead of time. So when I first open up a part file, if it happens to be a milling module file, it'll default to this gmilling_3x. If it's a turning file, it defaults to the Akuma post processor in my folder. These are all just from the folder themselves. So if you take a look at under my mill turn, these are all my mill turn posts that I have here, my milling posts. So it is the same list of posts that are found in that folder, just lets you choose them automatically. So when I first open up the part, that is auto-selected. That isn't to say when you open up the actual part file and you need to switch to a different machine, you have that ability. This is just the global settings. The global settings you set up here are copied and become the part settings when you first open up a part. So everything you're doing here is just to start the part, but you can always change it on the part or leave it as the defaults. Under GCode, it's letting you choose where you'd like to save any NC files, any GCode files that you've generated from your toolpaths. And you just select where you'd like them to be kept. The default is in the same directory that you chose pretty much up here, the user-defined directory. So wherever you choose to save your file, CampArt directory, it's saving it in the same location. But you do have all these other options here. So you can save it in a folder, in a subfolder, in the same CampArt directory. You can save it according to your post files. The VMID file is the definition of your machine that comes with your post, and you might have a particular location where you'd like to save that based off the post. If you actually have a particular location as in a file location you'd like to type in, you can select GCode Directory and browse to that location. When you generate your GCode, if you'd like to review it before you actually save it, then you can tell it what software you'd like to open it in. Now, I have it pointing to Notepad simply because that's the default for InventorCAM. We assume that you have Notepad as part of your Windows system. But if you have any other text editor, NC editor softwares, you can browse to that with this button here, and then just set that as your default text or G-code editor software. If we go to CampArt, we're getting more and more into the default geometries, default selections for when you open up a brand new part. In this case, under CampArt, I have the ability to actually skip the selection of the post, the locations. This is simply, if you check this box, it will use the defaults that we had just selected in our default CNC controller and our user directory section. So just by checking that box, I'm telling it to just skip the selections, just go with the defaults. You can create your files, your brand new files, in either compressed or uncompressed mode. This is simply a file management choice. If you go with compressed mode, what you'll get is a full a file with the InventorCAM or SolidCAM symbol next to it, and it basically will just be one file with your tool definitions, your tool paths, everything in one location. If you uncheck this box, then you get uncompressed mode, which still has the same InventorCAM file, but then it has an associated folder with the same name, which has all those definitions as a separate location. So it's more for file management if you're using a Vault software or anything like that, where you have to check in and out of files. Sometimes it's easier to just use the compressed mode because it is just one file with everything. While you're working on your InventorCAM parts, you're actually saving to the local temporary folder on your hard drive. This is even in the case if you're working on a part on a network, simply because we want to eliminate any kind of lag in communication with your network. So if you work locally on your temp folder, once you properly close your file, that's when it will compress it or leave it uncompressed, but that's when it'll save it to its final location that you selected when you first open up the part file. But while you're working on it, it is saved to this temp location here. And if we hover over that, click Browse, you'll see that it's saving it somewhere on my hard drive there. Automatic CampArt definition. Again, this is the default for when you first open up your CampArt. So if I want to skip the selection of a post, I can just say use CNC controller. Just check that box and it'll skip that one section. Creating coordinate systems, defining stock and target. There's a lot of stuff on here that you can set to automatically be done for you. So again, this will be covered in a later video when you actually open up a part. But this is where you would set the defaults for how your stock is defined, how your target is defined, and how your coordinate systems will be defined as well. My recommendation for here, if you're first starting out, is to just leave these unchecked so you can get into the habit of seeing how the stock and the target are defined. And if you find that you're doing the same thing over and over again, a lot of repetition when you first start a file, then you can check these boxes and get it done for you. One warning though, when you say define stock or define target, it's actually looking for the solids on screen. So if you have multiple solids on screen, maybe your part, your stock, a vise, clamps, that sort of thing, all of that will be considered either stock or target, depending on how you check these boxes here. So that's why I usually recommend leave it unchecked, see how it works, and then you'll get an idea as to how you want to move going forward. And it actually has this window for each type of module from InventorCAM and SolidCAM. And like I said, my recommendation is to have all of these checked or unchecked. I usually leave create machine setup checked only because that is actually required in the mill turn and turning modules. And the milling as well. That's because your post will need to see that when you're changing MAC positions, and we can cover that in a future intro video. Okay, coordinate system definition. This is just the levels associated with your coordinate system. So when you first define the coordinate system, you're going to set the upper level, lower level of the part, and then your tool start level, clearance levels, and tool Z level are all based off of whatever you have set up as the top of the part. These are incremental values from that position. So if I have the top of my part at Z equals 0, then tool start level will be at Z equals 5. That is simply all that it means. If my tool start level is, let's say, at the bottom of the top of the part represents Z equals 5, because maybe I put my Z equals 0 on the bottom of the part, then this would be Z equals 10. It's just an incremental amount from whatever the top of the part is you selected. Stock definition, similar to before. However you're defining your stock, you can tell it the default values for some of those selections that you'll see once we get into the definition of your stock, and we'll see that in a future training video. But in this case, all you're looking at is the placeholders for each of these selections when you choose it. Let's go down to tool table. So tool table is the definition of the tools you're using for your operations. Now, depending on where you're accessing the tool table, you might see the different functions on this window. Again, these are just the defaults. So if you wanted to import from one of the global libraries, you can point to the address of the global libraries. In this case, I'm pointing to my 2019 folder. The format you're going to use by default, well, I have it set to the TAB format because that is the most common format I'm going to see in my InventorCAM file. When I actually open up the Browse button, what is the first global library I wanted to look at? So all the libraries that come with InventorCAM are listed here, so you can say whichever one you want. If you've created your own tool libraries, again, that will be covered in another intro video. When you create your own libraries, they will also be on this list. So if you tend to use the same tools over and over again, and you don't want to have to load them individually, you can just go to your Browse for global libraries, have this automatically selected, the library that you've created yourself, and automatically import all the tools. When you import the tool, you can tell it here by default how that import will be done. Everything on here you can do on a part-by-part basis. This is just the defaults for that. When you export your tools, if you want to create your own libraries, you can tell it where to export them to. Again, I have it pointing to the 2019 folder. And the format. Again, you can export it in whatever format you need to. Let's go down to iMachining. So there have been some changes from previous versions of InventorCAM that I will cover in an intro video. Here is where you'll set the defaults for those various functions. So if you wanted to default a material, again, when you define your InventorCAM material, you can do that on a part-by-part basis. Depending on the material that you're machining, it might not be common to you, but if it is a common material and you wanted to auto-select it, you can choose from your iMachining database here. Some of the feature recognition functions that have been added to iMachining, you'll have control over their defaults here. So you can say that once you first open up your 2D iMachining, you can default it to the recognition of faces, or you can default it to any other option on here. And each of these options will be covered in the intro video related to iMachining. There's a bit of an extension with those features as well, so you can tell it how you like to extend here. So these are all the defaults for when you first open up your CampArt. It'll grab and copy these options here and put them into the part file as the part settings. So when you're in a CampArt, you just go to part settings and you'll have access to some of these options here, the ones that are related to the part file, but they will be copies of these defaults. Anything else on this or anything else from InventorCAM, just give us a call at 1-866-975-1115, extension 2. You can send us your parts or your questions via the ticket system at solidcamsupport.com. And please stay tuned for the rest of the videos in this intro series. Thanks for watching.